It's Saturday, it's a little bit overcast, and I really don't have a whole lot of responsibilities at the moment other than I'm going to put in some time with RC. But there's a lot of things to do. I'm getting too excited and I get sidetracked because I've got all these parts that I've had sitting around for a while, and now that I've got the engine actually in the car, those parts can start going on. So now, do I put in new shifter linkage to put it back to a column shift? Do I work on the new serpentine belt system that I've ordered? I'm glad that I didn't put the water pump on with silicone on the gaskets, because now I may need to take it back off to put that serpentine drive system on. That's where it mounts. But in the end, I think I've decided that we're going to just stick with the basics so that we can get this engine running first, and then we'll do everything else. So we're going to start on the fuel system today. There's the fuel line coming from the tank. You'll notice that it's hard line as it goes back into the frame there. Then we'll have to replace this flexible line with some fuel line that's actually made for fuel injection. We have it blocked off there from when we took the engine out. Then you'll notice that I have the clickety-clack on here. That's to empty the tank so that it will eventually be able to take off the filler neck and whatever else we need to do to get this fuel system going. Look up the little clickety-clack. See what kind of fuel flow we've got here. That's pretty good. I don't know if you can see that very well. Trying to make sure we don't overfill that. This isn't the best tank for that. It has a nice little filter screen that keeps all the stuff out, but it doesn't allow you to put the fuel line in more than a few inches. This is my Moroso fuel return kit that I bought, and I put it on a previous video, showed it to you. Maybe I can link that video here. But this setup can be used for a hard filler neck. What I mean by that is a filler neck that is made out of a rigid tubing, metal tubing. And what it's made for is that you cut that tubing, and then you would use a piece of this flexible hose on either side of it. You would cut out a piece in the middle that this would then take the place of, with the rubber hoses filling the gap there. But if you look what we have there, let me take you down there and see if I can show it to you. This is the filler neck on the El Camino. I'm kind of in the dark over here, but this has hard line for the filler neck, but then there's already a tube connecting the tank and the filler neck. So what I have marked here, if you can see that, I can't see if the glare takes over that or not, but this is the edge of the hard tubing on the one side of the tank. This is the edge of the hard tubing on the other side with the filler neck. And that right there is about in the middle. And we're going to try and cut that. We just want to get something started. This cutter actually isn't made for this, but we're going to try and at least start it here. That was a good start. Let's see. Probably have to do this off camera because I'm going to have to use more than one hand. So if you don't know what an AN fitting is, this is an AN fitting. And do this here a little bit. So this particular fitting will probably go in the end of the fuel rail here. And this is the end that will connect to fuel line. The good thing about these is there's not a hose clamp, and then you got to try prying the line off and then putting it back on and putting the hose clamp on. These undo simply. It's kind of like a pipe fitting. They screw together, and that is what connects those two together. And so it makes things much better for undoing and refitting and changing fuel filters and whatever. So that's where we're headed with these. But we'll go through, finish going through all the fuel system here with it. Just finishing up the fittings on the fuel pressure regulator for this system. System is a bypass system, which means that the fuel here, we got a fuel in and a fuel out, or it could be fuel in and fuel out. I don't think it really makes any difference. But the pressure is regulated through the bottom port here, which is the bypass to the fuel tank. So in our case, what we have is we have the fuel tank and fuel pump coming into one side. Then out the other side goes to the fuel rail, which the fuel rail in essence kind of dead ends, but the pressure in the rail is kept at a constant. So we just have to bleed off the air is all. This, as I said, then bypasses to the tank. That's how the pressure is regulated. The only difference here is that we have a vacuum port, and that vacuum port then regulates the pressure of the fuel depending on vacuum from the manifold. And this is a regular regulation for the entire thing. It adjusts the pressure and what scale you're at, like and how high and how low that you get. So we're going to mount this in the car using this bracket here. Probably actually just use a few Tech screws, self-tapping screws into the fender well, and then this will sit there. The middle fitting, or the bottom fitting on the pressure regulator, as I said before, is what goes back to the tank. That bypasses to the tank. We'll have to see whether we need a straight fitting, as I have on here, a 90 degree, or even a 45, because we're going to go right down through that same hole in the frame there, and that will be, will follow all the way along to the tank itself. And there, we'll probably have to go all the way to the other side, which is where the filler is, to put the return line in the filler neck. This line that we had on the El Camino coming from the fuel tank, this is right after the hard line. This stuff, if you see it here, it's just about petrified. So we're going to have to replace this, but it's just as well because we're going to be putting on all these AN fittings, and it requires a specific type of line. This here is Russell. This is Russell brand that comes from Summit, and I'm going to try a test fit here. We just got a little bit of this is some light oil that you're supposed to put on here. This is going to be quite the test fit here because I've never done this before. These literally just press into the hose. And we're going to see if I can do that or not. I'm not sure that this is going to be as easy as they make it out to be.
And get it on just about to the first bug, and then it comes out.
I think we're going to have to read a few more instructions to see exactly how we do this, because I just don't have the power to do it. Yep, I am pretty certain that we were going to have to do something else here. If you're smart, you would probably figure it out. It's been several days. So since the last time that I tried to do this, the fittings on these push-on or twist-on, however they call it, push-lock, these are like impossible to do with just your hands. So I spent a bunch of money, way more than I should have, for doing just this, on something from Cool Tools here, Koul Tools. And what it is a vise-like apparatus here, which clamps the hose in. Hopefully I'm in frame here. Clamps the hose in one side, the fitting in the other, and then you can screw them together to push it on, and that's how it works. So let me take just a minute and see if I can get this set up. So I have everything kind of set up here. We have this straight fitting that we're going to use, and that works with this here. But I have a little bit of a gripe about the tool already, and what I have is, I showed you in the case some of these fittings, and what these fittings are is on the back of one of these curve fittings, either a 45 or a 90. It's made to fit on the back of these in the vise, and then this is not the correct type of hose, but then you put that in the vise, and then that pushes that into the hose. But what happened is these were already in the vise, the number 6, because I'm sure they're probably the most common. But trying to get it out of the vise, there's a little dowel that indexes it in the tool, and that little dowel broke off trying to get in there. It was so hard. So one thing to watch there is do not try to pry those out with a screwdriver. You have to completely drive it from the back, and it's literally, you almost have to get a punch to do that. But let's get this here. So we've got 2 of these fittings. This is, I don't know what the difference in sizes are, but this is for a smaller hose. We have one for a larger hose, and I have the adapter for a 6-inch straight through here. So what we do here is, this is already tightened down, holding that in. I'm going to tighten it down on the hose itself. There it is, hold it in place. And then hopefully you can see this on the back side, there's a nut there, which is used to drive that, then holding the hose into it. I don't know that this is needed, but it may be a little bit overkill, but I'm going to use my impact driver. Well, obviously didn't get that down tight enough. It's just sliding on the hose. So let's get that down a little tighter. Now look at that. I would say that works as advertised. So then, if we back that off, don't want to go too far. Well, we should just pull it off that fitting. Then we should be able to loosen this up, and we have a fitting that's done, and we can put that in the car. All right. Got rid of the curl in the front. I don't know if you can see that curl up there. Coil slowly disappearing. That's what we're trying to do here. Alright, let me show you what we have to protect that hose. Alright, so this is just loom cover. We're actually going to use it as hose cover. It's going to offer this hose just a little bit of protection back where it goes through the frame. So we're going to take this, see if we can start it right here. is not as easy as you think it would be one-handed. Loom cover is made to split and go on there, but anyway, we're not going to be able to get that all the way back through the frame, but we're going to take it back a little bit through there. As I said, just to give the hose a little bit extra coverage where it goes through there. And that's about where that should be aligned. So what we're going to have is fuel line coming out of the frame, or the hard line, which will be from the pump, which will be mounted back by the tank. Hopefully you can see that. There we are. And then that will come through up to one side or the other. It really doesn't matter which side it goes in, and then it will go out the other side up to the fuel rail here. Back up a little bit so you can see we're in relationship to where the engine. This bottom hose is actually just the regulation portion of it, or the pressure regulator portion of it. So it returns to the tank, and it'll return through that same area there and follow back along the hard line to the tank. So what we have here is, this is the return line coming from the fuel pressure regulator. It's all in Russell hose. That's more expensive. If I would have used my brain a little bit more, I would have put a splice in it way up in the front and reused probably almost 8, 9, 10 feet of it to do something else. But it's already routed through little corners and holes and things, so we're going to leave it there. If we ever replace it, we'll replace it with regular hose. What we're going to do here is, I have just a regular splice. Whoops. Knocked you over there. As I was saying, I have a regular splice here. We're going to go from the Russell hose to some other hose I have. This really doesn't even need to be fuel injection hose. It just needs to get around the corner into the filler neck where the Moroso return adapter is, so that we can put it all together. So let's see if we can get that going. Hope this isn't as hard as putting those fittings on. I may have to take it down and do it. Yeah, unfortunately it's going to be. Well, I might be able to do it. Hurt my old hands, but let's get down here where I can get some more leverage. Wow, okay. Okay, there's that. Now let's see if we can put on a clamp. All right, this particular hose clamp doesn't need to be done down with any real force. I mean, it needs to be tight, but and the other hose really doesn't take anywhere near as much strength to put on there. Thread the needle there. If you get any of that movement, apologize, and we'll try and cut it out, hopefully so you don't get much of it. But this has got to come around here. I want to leave a little bit of length. This is around the corner from the fuel tank where the connection we just put on is. And this then needs to connect into this return. So let's get it cut off to the right length. We have another hose clamp here. Let's get that on the hose first. All right, gonna put a little natural lubricant on the on the end of that, and then hope you can see that. There we are. That was easy. And last but not least, at least for this portion of it, we'll tighten it up with a screwdriver. Once again, we don't want it to leak, but this doesn't have to be tight. The only pressure really this would have to hold is when the tank is full. You don't want it leaking out of this. It would have whatever pressure the tank puts on it. So we don't want to have that leaking anywhere. All right. Let's see about getting the fuel pump mounted. All right, although you can't quite see it, back here, back right behind this hose, is the main line coming from the tank. We need to hook up this hose right here to it. So what's going to happen is going to be a lot of finagling here, but this goes on here, and this is going to make just a very short run down here and onto that. So I need to cut it to length. I would say it needs to be about right on this line right there. then we need to cut it. Got a little bit wedged in there. There we are. So if you can see that right there, about right here, I'm going to cut a little bit long. All right, let's see if that does it. Hopefully I'm not in your way. That looks just about right. We're going to have just about enough room for a double hose clamp there. And hopefully this goes over the metal fitting easier than it goes over the fittings it comes with, because I can't hardly get in there to force it on. Oh yeah. Let's get these hose clamps up out of the way. All right, now for supposedly the easy part. Right, now for what hopefully is the easy part. This is just a, I guess you could consider it a test fit. There it goes. And hopefully all is well. Yeah, that may not be the best thing in the world, but I think that'll work. In fact, we may need a little bit of that extra clearance for the front mount on the engine for distributor and power steering and everything. So I think that's it for the top part of the engine. We've got the main line coming from the tank, got the continued pressure line going to the rail, and then we've got of course the rail will be pressurized, and this is the return to it, return to the tank. Now we need to go down and figure that out as well. We've got most of the line run to the tank, but we've got to finish that off. All right, we're underneath the car here. You're kind of laying on your back beside me, and I kind of wanted to explain how I have the setup here. This is the last part of the fuel system, at least as far as fuel and lines go. We do have electrical system that'll need to be hooked up to the control module so that everything works. And this, I'm going to try and keep it out of the way, but this is what hopefully will be hooked up as a vent tube so that we can fill this up without it splashing back on us. If any of you have any good ideas for what fittings I need to use to take this up and attach it to the top of the fuel filler neck, I'd be more than happy to take your suggestions there. Let me see for the moment, see if I can tuck this out of the way. All right. Hopefully we can see everything there. So this is the original line coming out of the fuel tank, goes through a filter, which is what it originally did. And that hose I disconnected from the line that went to the engine compartment because I needed to hook that into our fuel pump, which will then supply us with the high pressure fuel that the fuel rail will need on the Edelbrock fuel injection system. So all this is just the same. It just goes into the pump instead of into the line to the fuel tank. This doesn't need to be high pressure because all it's doing is pulling fuel from the tank. And in fact, it's in a vacuum. It's not more of in a vacuum than under pressure. But coming out of the fuel pump on this side, I'm coming out and making a loop right now. This is the reason why I have it positioned like this. Eventually, with some more of the AN fittings, which I have, I will be getting a fuel pressure, not a fuel pressure. I'll be getting a fuel filter. They recommend that you have a fuel filter before the pump and after the pump so that you don't contaminate the pump or anything. If the pump goes bad, you don't want to contaminate the fuel rail itself. So this right here is just temporary, this loop. What will eventually be here is it will go into an AN fitting with a fuel filter here, and then it'll come back off of the AN fitting or off of the fuel filter, which has AN fittings, back around and go into the fuel tank. The only additional thing that I've done here is for carburation, this was normally just slipped on. There was a stop here, a little ridge on the hard line. What I've done is pushed it over the hard line, over that ridge, and then done down the hose clamp on there. The idea here is that we're going to be running somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe, 60 PSI on this line here. And while this has barbs on it, reverse barbs, this doesn't have anything. It was just a smooth fitting. So I put it over that ridge. Hopefully that will keep it in place so that the high pressure won't split any of our hoses. So we're done with the fuel system, at least as far as that goes. Electrical will finish it off so that that works. But we're moving right along. Once we got the correct tools, namely that press for the press lock systems here, we were able to get everything on. We have the main line coming to the fuel pressure regulator. From the fuel pressure regulator to the rails, which is how we'll fuel it. We'll need to bleed those. I'm not going to turn them on right now because if I do have to take something apart, it'll just make more of a mess. But then we have the regulating portion of the regulator. That is the return line that goes to the tank, back to the tank. And like I said, all those hoses will do back up when we actually have the wiring from the system ready to go. And in fact, that's what we're going to put in next so that we can button all that up. And all of the other things can wait, things like seats and shifters. All those are things that already work the way they are now. We just want to change them. So thanks for watching. We're going to continue on with the wiring next time to hopefully make sure that we can get this running. Thanks for watching.